I'm going to show you tactics that you can utilize on a hard court and a clay court. And players generally fall into two traps when they play on both surfaces. Number one, players will often play exactly the same on a clay court as they do on a hard court. Trap number two is that players will often completely abandon their playing style in accordance to the surface they find themselves on. Both of these traps are going to lead to you not being able to play your best tennis. The answer lies somewhere in the middle. While you absolutely always must play the style that suits you best, there are definitely tactical adjustments that you can make on a hard court that are going to be different from the tactical adjustments that you're going to make on a clay court.
That was the perfect strategy for the hard court. So deep return followed by stepping in and going for the winner. That's exactly what I gotta do, and that's where my strategy changes a little bit. On a hard court, I feel more comfortable doing this because I can just step in and use my opponent's space in order to create such a winner. On the clay court, I tend to go back a little bit and I tend to spin the ball a little bit and try to extend the rally because I can rely on my physical ability to win the point a little bit more than on the hard court. This is exactly why you have to step in and be more aggressive. You see, I tried to do the same thing I would do on clay court. I moved back and I spin the ball, but it wasn't enough. And he stepped in and put it away. This is exactly why I had to step in and try to be a little bit more aggressive on hard court especially. A point prior to this, I moved back and I got punished. This time around, I stepped in and I won the point. That's why you have to be a little bit more aggressive again. That was a good body serve. Sometimes the speed of your serve isn't the most important thing, but also the placement. So even though this wasn't my fastest serve, I played it right directly into his body, and that's why it was very difficult to return. That's it. That's exactly what I gotta do. Make a good serve and then step in and go for the winner. And you know, I'm a naturally defensive player, so this doesn't come to me naturally, but I have to force myself to do these things because that's how you get better. So again, I'm just emphasizing the fact that when I play Coach Nick, especially on a hard court, I don't want to rely on my back foot and I don't want to be too defensive because even though that feels comfortable, I'm going to end up losing a lot of the points. So I really got to step in and try to keep my body weight forward and be as aggressive as I can. That was a great return, even though his serve was pretty good. That's another point. On hardcore guys, you can attempt to be a little bit more aggressive on the return. Why? Because the conditions are a little bit faster and the ball is a little bit more forgiving in my opinion. For example, when I play on clay court, I tend to move back a little bit more, add topspin and start a point. Why? Because I believe in my physical ability to run down many balls. However, on the hard court, conditions are much faster. So you're going to be better off just trying to step in and be a little bit more aggressive and more dominant, just like I was in this point.
So my tactics on hard court are very simple. I have to avoid running because I understand that at my age right now, movement is a big problem. And if I have to defend and run, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. So I'm going to try to prevent that from happening by being aggressive on my serve and on the first ball after the serve, and also trying to be aggressive on my return games. Now, I understand myself as a player, and I know that I have long strokes, especially on my forehand. So when people say on hard court you got to stand close to the baseline, take the ball early, that might work for some, but might not work for others on hard court. In my case, I'm more like a poor man's Daniil Medvedev, or you can call me a Skid Row Medvedev, where there's some similarities there and I have to give myself a lot of time. So I am going to be aggressive, but in a neutral baseline position, I'm going to be further behind the baseline as well as on the return of serve on both the first and the second serve. Now that's a hard lesson to learn because the fact is that when you serve flat like I did there and it goes right into the racket of the opponent, it's actually not a very hard return to hit if we're talking about a higher level player. So that right there was a poor placement. I got to concentrate on hitting the corners more. So normally a good tactic is to control the point with the forehand if you happen to have more strength on that side, which is most players. But in my case, since I am moving so slowly on that particular forehand from the backhand side, I didn't get there fast enough. I was still moving to this side. I hit a weak forehand. I opened up the court for him and he got me with a winner. So there's two things I can do. Number one, I can try to move faster and play with more intensity, or actually avoid running around my backhand and hit some backhands until I feel the intensity and the confidence to start getting around that backhand faster. Now, one important thing to consider for your own hard court tactic is that you have to figure out your opponent and what his or her strengths and weaknesses are. In case of Milan, one of his biggest strengths is the fact that he runs everything down, and you have to hit a winner 2, 3, 4 times in a rally sometimes. So I actually already finished the point after that forehand. I thought that an easy overhead, but I have to be ready to keep the intensity up even when it appears that I have the point easily won. So that's one of the most obvious tactics on any surface really, is to hit behind the player. So I hit a kick serve with pretty good placement. He was off the court. And then the first ball in the rally, I go strong to that same side because obviously his momentum was going towards the middle of the court and I caught him wrong-footed. Sometimes the opponent is too good. That was a case right there. I don't think I played a poor point. He was just better. That right there is what my game is built on. Serving well and then cleaning up with my forehand. Now, of course, on a fast hard court, serving volleying is a great tactic, but again, understand yourself as a player. Number one, do you have good volleys? If the answer is no, it makes no sense to serve and volley. Improve your volley technique first and then try it out in the match. Second question you gotta ask yourself, how is your movement? Are you agile? Are you fast? If the answer is yes, and you answer the first question yes, now you can absolutely introduce some serve and volley into your service games. In my case, my movement is very poor, and that's why I don't serve and volley much. I have done it when I was younger and in better shape. But for demonstration's sake, our next point, I am going to serve and volley, and I'm actually going to slice my first serve, which is going to give me a little bit more time to get in. I'm going to go down the tee. And that's exactly why I don't serve and volley, because there I could have hit a backhand or a forehand. It would have been much easier for me personally compared to that tough lunging low volley. The tactics worked. I got to base my service game on a high first serve percentage and dictating with my forehand. Guys, on the return of serve on hard court, depending on your style, the length of your ground strokes primarily, don't be stubborn and stand very close to the baseline. It's okay to back up and give yourself a little bit more time on the return, especially when we're talking about a first serve. And a great example of that is Daniil Medvedev, who, after a match against Tsonga, who was serving 215, 220 kilometers per hour, and Medvedev was standing very close to the baseline, he just told himself, I'm going to back up. And then from that moment on, he understood that he could actually get the return in play. But it's not only that, the ball also happened to be more in the strike zone because of that. Yes, there are some disadvantages to not being able to protect the wide serve and having to run sometimes on the return, but for his game style, this makes absolutely perfect sense, while this might not necessarily work for other players. For me personally, I do like a little bit more time as well. Even on the second serve, I find myself hitting the ball much higher when I'm close to the baseline, unable to time it well and taking it on the rise. So I actually prefer, when I back up on the return independent of the first or second serve. And from there, when I'm further back, I feel like I can be a lot more aggressive. That's the key. The positioning on the court is not always related to defense and offense. In reality, when I stand closer to the baseline, I'm a lot more reactive, defensive than when I'm further back, where that extra time gives me more opportunities to take full cuts and indeed be more aggressive. So Milan doesn't have the fastest serve in the world, but I'm still going to give myself about 2 meters behind the baseline. Now on the second serve, I'm only going to move up a little bit. I'm still going to give myself time. So you see there that even though I returned the second serve, which was not the strongest second serve in the world, that extra time gave me a lot of confidence to position myself and take a full cut on my return, hit it very strong, and then from there on I was able to dictate the point. I'm going to try to redirect as much as I possibly can, and I'm going to get a very central location on my return. But I'm going to try to neutralize the ball more than anything else. Okay, he hit a low percentage shot there, but I'm happy with that return. That was a redirectory return, so to speak. I just kind of bunted it in the middle of the court deep, and I was able to neutralize the point. The thing about hard court is that your opponent, especially if that opponent is of a higher level, will have the ability to take more balls on the rise. So you can't lollygag and take all the time in the world when you're returning. You have to get back to the middle as fast as possible. There I got burned. I hit a good return. He picked it up off the ground and I just wasn't ready for the next shot. So on hard court, when you have the upper hand in a rally and you are able to stretch your opponent, it is a very good idea to start closing in and get some easy points close to the net. Again, I was able to take a full cut off a serve that wasn't the fastest, and standing a little further behind the baseline didn't make my return any more defensive. It was in actuality very aggressive. All right, running around the backhand is a fantastic tactic to utilize in your return games, especially on hard court, where your return is going to be more lethal. But on hard court is that the serve is going to be quicker and your footwork has to be lightning fast. My footwork there was sluggish. There wasn't enough intensity there, and I ended up hitting a very weak forehand. The entire court was open. He hit the easy forehand winner. Okay, generally, taking the pace out is great, but you can't ever leave the ball high because any higher level player is going to punish you and hit an easy winner. So that obviously was a chip shot that set up way too high. Those type of points, if they're happening on the return, they're in the advantage of the returner, because there he got lucky. I hit a pretty good drop shot. It just was a hair too short. That was a good point. I got to keep going that way. Okay, I got a second serve here. Opportunity to run around, but quickly. Okay, you saw what happened there. If you show the opponent that you are willing to run around and you do it a lot, expect to be burned every now and then, which I did there. I moved too early on that one. I'm going to be aggressive on this first serve return. So what you got to do on the return a lot is have the proper intention. Predetermine what you're going to do. Are you going to counter punch, neutralize the ball, or are you going to go for it? Don't let things happen accidentally. Have a plan when you're out there on the return game. That is matching your individual style. When it comes to clay court tactics, there are a few things you have to consider. Number one, the weather conditions affect a clay court much more than they do a hard court. Now, what I'm standing on is called hard true, and this surface is more similar to a hard court than a clay court. So what I'm about to say applies more to the red clay courts that you find in Europe or South America. When the weather is hot, the ball will generally bounce higher on a clay court. When the weather is cold, the ball will generally bounce lower. Now on a clay court, you can actually play through a little bit of rain, something that you cannot do on a hard court because it gets too slippery. And when the weather conditions become wet, the ball becomes extremely slow, and so does the surface. So when it comes to clay court tactics, you have to take the weather into account in how you're going to construct your points. Now, even though there might be some faster clay courts, generally a clay court will always be slower compared to a hard court. So an important tactical consideration to make is patience. You cannot expect that you're going to end the points as quickly as you can on hard court. In other words, the ball will come back a lot more and you will have to hit 2, 3, maybe even 4, 5 winners to win the point. So a lot of players get frustrated. They go for low percentage shots and they make a tremendous amount of errors on clay courts. So patience is of the utmost importance, having the ability to stay in the rallies longer and understanding that it's going to be a lot more difficult to hit winners. Another important consideration is movement. This applies for your own game, but also for your opponent's game. Now, one classic mistake that hard court players do when they get on a clay court is that they don't slide. On a hard true, it's going to be more difficult to slide than on a regular red clay court. But the biggest mistake that players commit is sliding after they make contact with the ball. So they will go up to the ball and set the same way they do on a hard court, and then the momentum of the movement towards the ball will carry them in this direction. They will slide after they have hit the ball. So in other words, they will slide in the wrong direction, which will make the recovery back into the court more challenging. This is why sliding on a clay court is crucial, because it stops your movement. You don't want to slide out after a shot. You want to slide into the shot. Now I have another video that I'm going to link in the description where I explain the differences between a lateral slide and a forward slide. Now regarding your opponent, an important tactical consideration to make is the fact that their footing is going to be more unstable compared to a hard court. So when you attempt to hit a drop shot or an angle shot, the opponent is not going to get out of the blocks quite as fast. So on a clay court, it makes a lot of sense to utilize more drop shots and more angle shots. And most importantly, the surface itself is more inconsistent. And what that means is that when the ball hits a clay court surface, is going to be more unpredictable compared to a hard court surface. So what does that mean? Well, when you utilize underspin, backspin, topspin, these type of shots are going to be extremely effective on a clay court, because those type of balls will react more on a clay court than they do on a hard court. And the same thing that I said about hard court tactics applies to clay court tactics as well. Do not sacrifice your strengths and weaknesses based on the surface that you play on. While there are some tactical things that you can do on a clay court in comparison to a hard court, which we're going to demonstrate very shortly, keep in mind that you have to understand yourself as a player and generally play a style that's going to suit you best independent of the surface.
That's an example of a good clay court point, guys. So I remain patient while playing deep topspins. Great shot, Coach Nick. Before this point, I made a point about not playing the ball too softly and making sure I add enough spin on every single shot. And this is exactly what happened. I went on my back foot, I tapped the ball barely, and that's why I lost the point. Oh boy, that was fast and precise. That's the goal, guys. So this point, guys, is a good example of why I actually believe I'm a better hardcore player than a clay court player, regardless of what people believe. For some reason, whenever I'm playing on clay court, I tend to be a little bit more defensive, and I find myself hitting a lot on my back foot, so I gotta really focus on not being afraid to hit the ball. Oh! That was a great point. That's why I really love this kick serve, especially on the clay court, because you can really drive the opponent outside of the court and give you the ability to finish the point. You just gotta make sure you kick it enough, otherwise you're gonna end up defending yourself. So guys, when it comes to return on hard court versus clay court, generally speaking, on clay court, you can stay back a little bit and focus on the topspin a little bit more. Yeah, I like to take a couple steps back and then put a lot of topspin on that return in order to push him back and start the point on a good note. Too good, too good, too good. Great point by Coach Nick. But yeah, guys, as I said on the return, last point, it's very, very difficult to counterpunch it and attack it, especially on the first serve. So really try your best to push the opponent back. That's the one, guys. Just like I was saying, the return, I put a lot of spin, push him back, disable him from attacking me. Then I remained patient. I added a lot of topspin on the following 3 or 4 shots, waited for my chance, and then attacked. And again, my strategy on clay court is a little bit more patient simply because the conditions are slower, so it's harder to hit through the opponent. Great point by Coach Nick. Now, the problem with this strategy, guys, especially on the return, is that sometimes if you don't play deep enough, you're gonna be on the defense. Incorporate a little bit more of a slice in order to change the rhythm and throw off the opponent. Oh boy, great return. So as I was saying, guys, sometimes if I'm feeling good, the conditions are nice, like there's not much wind, it's very predictable, then you might as well be a little bit more aggressive, step in on second serve and attack, which is what I'm gonna try to do right now.
Some of my clay court tactics are going to be specific for me, but some are also going to be general in nature. And generally on clay, no matter whether you're serving or returning, you don't want to play too close to the baseline. Of course, when the situation presents itself, you can close in and play inside the baseline when the opponent is playing defense. But generally speaking, the reason why you don't want to be too close is because the bounce of the ball is too unpredictable. And when you play close and you have to take a lot of balls on the rise, it's very difficult to do so. So even though I'm going to be aggressive even on clay, I'm still going to have a neutral baseline position that's further behind the baseline compared to hard court. Now when it comes to my serve, I'm going to be utilizing a lot of slice because the ball is going to react off a slice serve more on a clay court versus hard. And I'm also going to aim closer to the line because if I happen to hit the line, the ball is not going to bounce at all. And I'm going to get an easy ace. Even on the outside, I'm going to go out wide, but I'm going to try to put some slice on there, just to have more effect on the bounce of the ball. Now here's the thing about topspin versus flat on clay. I'm more of a flat ball striker, but it's going to be very difficult to play a flat baseline style on clay. Why is that? Because the ball is going to be coming back more. And generally with the flat ball striking, there's going to be more mistakes. So I have to try to put as much spin as possible on clay because number one, I'm going to have to hit harder than I normally do because the balls are going to fluff up. They're going to get affected by the clay more. Generally, the conditions are going to be slower and it's going to be more difficult to put flat balls away. And the harder you strike as a flat baller, generally the more mistakes there will be. So I'm going to have to try to put as much spin on the ball as possible and play my aggressive style. I love a clay court, especially against a guy like Milan, who brings everything back. You have to hit the winners, like 3 or 4 of them, where on hard court, it's a lot easier to end the point quickly. So again, patience is key. Okay, now I got a second serve. So here, I'm gonna try to put as much kick on the ball as possible, because again, when you serve with kick on clay, it has much more of an effect on the bounce than it does on a hard court. So I'm gonna try to get my toss in order, keep my mechanics clean, and kick that second serve. Now, even though I'm going down the tee, I'm still gonna put some slice on my first serve. Now, how about coming to the net on clay? Well, that's something that actually works really well. Because of the unpredictability of the bounce, you can every now and then sneak in a certain volley where the opponent's not expecting. You can get an easy volley if you manage to get close to the net. So here I'm gonna kick my first serve and come to the net. Got a little bit lucky there. I was looking in the sun, almost got lobbed off the return, but I was managed to get a hold of the high ball. Okay, I'm gonna go out wide again, but I'm trying to get my target to be as close to the line as possible. That wasn't on the line, but again, when you make your first serves and the serve has some action on it, the clay court surface will be very beneficial. You saw there, that was actually not a bad return by Milan, it was just a bad bounce off the serve. All right, now I'm gonna use an old school clay court tactic and slide further away from the middle. He's probably thinking I'm gonna hit a sharper angle to his backhand, but I'm actually gonna slice my second serve down the tee. Yeah, and it worked. Every now and then you can sneak in this old school clay court tactic. The reason why I say clay court, because on clay you got a little bit more time to cover the other side that's completely exposed. On hard court, if the opponent hits a clean return, in the open court you're gonna have a very hard time running that down, while on clay there's a tad more time to play defense. All right, now again, I'm going out wide with slice close to the line. He's starting to get a read on my slice out wide, so I'm gonna have to mix it up, but for now, keep it simple on the second and kick it to the backhand. Okay, that was good placement on that forehand. Not too risky and enough spin on there to give it some control. I'm gonna mix it up a little bit and go flat out wide, give him a different look. Again, enough spin on those forehands to give it a lot of margin, a lot of control. That's what I gotta do on the clay court. All right, now second serve. Now I'm gonna mix it up and slice the second out wide. He broke a string. No, he goes for a dropper. He almost made it. That's a lesson for everyone. Independent on surface. When the opponent breaks a string, you got to get the ball in, but not as badly as I got in that backhand. Even with a broken string, he got me there. So I need to just be very conservative with the shot, but also don't give him a sitter half court. I got lucky on that one. That forehand did not have a lot of spin on it, but I was in a pretty good position. The ball was a little bit higher. It was easier to flatten it out with control. Next one, I'm going to go body. That's a very effective location on clay. Again, if the ball bounces a little bit weird, he could get jammed. It worked on that one. It bounced a little bit off. Okay, now I'm going to give him a different look and go kick on the first. Again, looking for a favorable bounce and controlling the rally with my forehand. Yes, that worked. So not only is the kick serve extremely effective on clay because of the bounce, but also because the opponent is going to have less traction, harder to get out the blocks. If you get your kick serve off the court, recovery of the opponent is going to be tougher and you can dictate the point with your forehand, or if you happen to have a better backhand, maybe even with your backhand. Okay, now I'm going to go flat down the tee just to mix things up. All right, here's the important thing about drop shots on clay. It is a phenomenal, effective tactic to utilize. But number one, you have to be a player that has good feel and has good drop shots. I'm not necessarily a player that relies on feel so much, but having said that, I felt like that was a pretty good opportunity for a drop shot. I didn't hit it that poorly, but he's also a guy that's very fast. So not necessarily a wrong play, but looking back now, even though the drop shot is a viable tactic on clay, I should have stuck to my strength, which is not a finesse game, it's a power game, and I should have ripped my forehand. Of course, whether you use drop shots or not highly depends on the opponent's foot speed as well and the overall fitness of the opponent. So in Milan's case, when he plays me, his drop shots against me are going to be highly effective because I don't move well and I'm very slow moving forward while he's extremely fast. So that's another thing to consider, is the speed of your opponent to determine whether you're going to use a lot of drop shots or not. All right, now I'm going flat out wide. And I already told you guys that topspin is extremely effective, not only because you're going to miss less, but also the ball is going to be more inconsistent on the other side when it bounces. This also goes for the slice. A slice that's struck with a low trajectory and with a lot of underspin is going to be more effective on clay versus a hard court. So here, I'm going to kick my first serve out wide and I'm going to look to slice some backhands. So Milan got caught off guard a little bit on that slice, but he also popped the string. He switched to a brand new racket, a Yonex, and I was back to his Babolat. And he blamed it on the racket, but I think it was more the slice that made the miss. All right, now again, kick to the backhand and trying to slice some backhands. All right, very nice point, but I should have gone for a little more feel and finesse on that backhand volley. All right, again, I'm gonna go kick out wide and this time dominate with my forehand. That's what happens when you serve on the line on clay. You get a lot of lucky bounces. All right, last point right here. I'm gonna stick with my bread and butter and go slice out wide, trying to hit it as close to the line as possible. I missed that a little bit. Let's go with the bread and butter, which is a kick to the backhand. I got the line again. This is what you get when you learn directional control on the serve. You can gain a lot of benefits when you play on clay because the closer to the line you are, the more favorable bounces you will get. All right, actually, I'm gonna play one more. So again, I'm gonna kick it and try to hit it as close to the line as possible.
Oh, Milan, that was nice.
I didn't get any kick on that serve. For some reason it flattened out and you got a clean look at it. Okay, my return positioning is gonna be further behind the baseline because I need to give myself time, especially on the first serve with my long swings, even though of course I'm gonna try to abbreviate them as much as possible, but I wanna be able to take a full swing and my full swing happens to be longer, so I'm gonna give myself enough space back here and try to take some cuts on the return. Of course on the second serve, I'm going to sneak in a little bit, but not too much. I need time to be able to blast my returns. And my location is going to be very central. So on clay, even more than hard court, when you're further back, it gives you time to find the right positioning and the right timing on your shots. It makes it a lot easier to hit hard. I've got a second serve here. I'm going to try to run around the backhand. So the reason why you want to run around your backhand return more on clay versus hard is because you have more time. So on hard court, the ball is going to bounce a little bit quicker off the surface and you're going to get handcuffed more. You're going to be jammed, while on clay, you have that little bit extra time if you move quickly enough to get away from your backhand and smack a forehand return from the backhand side. So I'm going to try it again here on this side. I'm going to try to run around my backhand return. Okay, so there I used my drop shots more wisely. He was in a much more defensive position than the last time I tried it, and it worked really well. He barely got to that one. Slice working to my advantage. a very low trajectory, and he couldn't really do much on those shots. I was able to hit my forehand pretty hard on that one. All right, guys, that's good enough on the return of serve. You see that taking big targets, being aggressive on the return can provide a lot of benefits. In addition to that, you also have the option to be very aggressive on second serves and run around your backhand if you happen to have a better forehand than backhand. Milan, what I wanted to do with this video was show that tactics are very individual. So my tactics are not going to be the same as your tactics. Now, I didn't hear what you said while you were talking, but I'm sure it was completely different than what I was saying, because your tactics are going to be specific to your strengths and weaknesses, and vice versa for me. But having said that, there are some general guidelines for people to follow when they play on hard court versus clay. Most importantly, to me, the most important factor on clay is footwork, foot speed, and patience, and maybe some variety to your shots where you can play with more underspin, more topspin, and maybe some finesse game. What do you think?
Definitely, like you said, everyone's different, and your game is different than mine. So inherently, we are going to have a little bit of a different approach. But when it comes to me individually, the main difference between clay court and hard court is actually, okay, there's a bunch of little differences, but the main point I want to make for my game personally is when you play clay court, sure, the point is going to be a little bit longer, there's going to be a little bit more rallies naturally. But with that said, when I play on clay court, I really need to focus to transfer the weight forward and still try to attack the ball and put a lot of topspin, which is much easier for me on hard court. That's why people think that I'm a clay court player, but I'm actually a much better hard court player.
I agree 100%. I think you play much better on hard court.
I am much more successful on hard court. And again, you wouldn't think, because you would think,
yeah.
Oh, I have a lot of spin, I can run.
And you grew up on clay too.
And I grew up on clay, but when I moved to America, I realized that my potential is much higher on the hard court.
Yeah.
Because when I play on the hard court,
yeah,
it's much easier for me to use my opponent's space to be more aggressive. So that's why when I play with you on the hard court, I can make much more winners, and I'm much more offensive than on the clay court. So actually, the biggest thing for me on clay court is to try to approach the same way as on hard court. Step in, try to put a lot of spin on the ball, but also transfer the weight forward. And just because I'm playing on clay court doesn't mean I gotta run and just push the ball, right? Well, so changing that is a very important aspect to me. And also one thing, sorry to interrupt, one thing that I like to do on clay court that helps me is I like to utilize angles, drop shots, and things of that nature a little bit more, simply because the clay court is a slower surface.
Yes.
So it's much more difficult for me to hit through the opponent.
Yes.
Therefore, I gotta emphasize more things like short angles, drop shots, short slices, in order to accommodate for that difference in being able to hit through the opponent, which is much easier on hard court.
Well, Milan,
that makes sense.
It makes so much sense, and I agree 100%. Like, for me, it's easier to play you on clay versus hard court.
Yes.
And see, on clay, you end up running yourself to death, because I can be more aggressive and you get to a lot of balls, but you play so much defense.
Right. 100%.
It's hard for you to be aggressive unless you're doing drop shots or crazy passes from defensive situations. You're really good at that, but on hard court, you're more offensive.
Yes.
But see, a lot of people don't realize, like someone like me, who's like someone that relies on a power game and a big serve, and it's not the greatest mover, I actually prefer, out of all the surfaces in the world, a slow, wet, muddy clay court in Germany and like May.
Wow,
this is where I played my best tennis.
Right, I agree.
Because I'm going to tell you why. Because first of all, the ball is not going to bounce high. It's going to be more in my strike zone. Because I have more longer swings, I can hit much harder without missing. For example, I always bring up the example of John Isner taking Nadal to 5 sets on a wet clay court at the French Open, and also beating Federer and Davis Cup on a very slow indoor clay court. So clay court is not only beneficial to clay court specialists, it also can be beneficial for power players under the right circumstances, because there are so many types of clay court tactics dependent on the type of the surface and the weather and so on. For example, Nadal, everybody knows that he's good on any clay, of course, but his favorite clay court is a hard surface on a very hot day where the ball bounces very high. That's where he's pretty much unbeatable, and that to me is the absolute biggest nightmare. I went one time to Spain to prepare for the German club matches. I went to Spain and played a satellite in Spain. I told myself I'm never going here again because the courts were so rock hard. The ball was bouncing so high, and that's my absolute nightmare when I have to play balls above my shoulders.
100%.
So clay courts is a very complex thing
And I can give
to
you
consider.
one specific example of this, so just to make it a little bit easier
Yeah.
for the viewers. So say when we play on hardcourt, and you hit a great first serve.
Yeah.
I take a couple steps back and I block it.
Yes.
And it blocks very fast and deep.
Yes.
Whereas on clay court, when you hit a fast serve like that, I do block it the same way.
Yes.
But it ends up being a little bit slower and a little bit shorter, which makes it exactly in your strike zone. And that's why whenever I'm returning on play against you,
Yeah.
I find myself in many, many defensive positions.
Right.
Whereas on hardcore, I can block it, and it blocks much
Sure.
quicker, with much
Sure.
more pace, and it kind of neutralizes the serve much more in a way.
It does, and also,
See what I mean? Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And also for big servers, when they can get the ball close to the line, you get so many bad bounces close to the line,
Yes,
and you
yes.
get a lot of service winners that way. So,
Right. 100%.
yeah, a lot of people wouldn't think so, but actually, I like clay. I also like hard court. For
Right.
me personally, my absolute nightmare surface is like a grass court.
Yeah.
That's
sounds
because
tough.
I can't bend that good,
Yeah, that
and I
sounds
can't
tough.
move that good, and I can't get low that good. And also, I never really liked playing on carpet in Germany. I
Yeah.
always hated that. It was too fast for me and too much of a low bounce.
Right.
All right, Milan. Thank you, man. That was
Thank you
a
so much,
fun.
Coach. That was
All
awesome.
right.
Great
Yeah,
project.
man. Thank you.